Hello, good morning, and I'm so glad you could join us in this wee warm-up part of Daily Faith. We have got a very important program today. You have been watching in the last few weeks the incredible events taking place in Israel. How Hamas has sent about 3,000 or 4,000 rockets, and Israel has responded back and forth. This is a never-ending problem. And we are going to be talking about Israel today and why it is important to you, how you are involved and you are entwined in God's love affair with this people. And the Bible says they will prosper that love thee. And my dear friend, a great man of God, a great Bible scholar, Mark Ivey is with us today. And he's going to be teaching and sharing some key things that you need to understand. I would suggest you get a piece of paper and a pen. You may want to record this because you'll be getting some scriptures and some thoughts on the issues there today that I think will be worthy of your time and attention. And so if you could please also help me by sharing, if you can hit the share button on your screen right now, and you've got friends in the church that love Israel. You've got people that you know that love Israel. You know people that don't know how important Israel is. In Great Britain, for example, many folk are pro-Palestinian because we have totally lost the plot in Great Britain as far as how important and how God's relationship with Israel is. When Britain turned his back on Israel, Britain ceased to be Great Britain, and it's quite an amazing thing. So I want you to, if you could please hit the share button today and let your friends know. Particularly, I would invite you and encourage you to talk to your pastor. Give him a call, text him right now. And on your screen, there's a wee bell. And if you tap that bell, it will help me get in contact with you. So when we start Daily Faith, it will notify you that we've begun. We are getting some of the most amazing Christian leaders, men and women of God, with vision and clarity on Daily Faith to speak into your life. The reason why it's called Daily Faith is because we want to be a part of your faith structure so that you can have that impact and impartation into your life regarding what God is doing in the church today. And today is a very important program. And so I just want you to do that every day of the week at this time, 11 a.m. Eastern time, 10 Central. In Europe, it depends which time zone you're there. 5 hours if you're in the UK, 6 hours if you're in Germany and France, 7 hours if you're in Eastern Europe. And so you can work back from East, or work forward rather from our Eastern time. Join us every day. On Monday nights, we are on CTN, which is a network with about 51 million viewers. And God is really helping us. God is blessing and growing the program. It's on DirecTV, channel 376. Also on Dish, channel 267. And on the Glory Star Network at channel 117. Yesterday we had a network contact us and said, we want to carry you live every day on our network, on our satellite. So we are trying to figure out whether we can discipline ourselves enough for me to do this little blurb that I did at the beginning of the show to actually finish exactly at 11 o'clock to begin the program. And my sons just are not convinced that I have such discipline in me yet, so we're working on that even as we speak. But God is growing this ministry, and I'm so glad you're part of it. I just love doing what I do. God is doing great things in the ministry. You'll be hearing that in a few moments. I'm glad you're with us. Welcome to Daily Faith. Hey, welcome to Daily Faith today. My name is Philip Cameron and I am glad you are with us. We have got a tremendous program today, an important program today. Mark Ivey is my guest and we are going to be discussing Israel and the importance of Israel and God's plan for Israel and the historical importance of Israel. This country, a tiny wee country, is the cause of consternation for most of the world because God's hand is on this place. And God's hand is on His people. The Jewish nation, through Abraham, have had a covenant with God. And you can hate them, whatever you want. These are God's folk, and the Bible says they will prosper that love thee. And this one nation, Israel, and today we have Mark Ivey, a great man of God, a great pastor friend for many years in my life, one of the admirals of my life, a man who knows the voice of God. I trust his wisdom in these matters tremendously. And a few weeks ago we were talking, and he shared some of the things, and I said, stop, whoa, whoa, whoa. I says, I don't normally do programs on Friday, but we're going to do one today because we want to have you on as soon as possible. And we're going to have him with us in a few minutes. And I mean this, you are going to be blessed beyond measure. Have you watching in the news? You've heard all this with fake news, fake news. Are you watching all this stuff that's coming out right now about the fake news? Remember when President Trump spoke about the medicine hydrochlora something? I can't pronounce it. It's such a long word. And I know you're shouting at the screen right this minute. Yesterday, the Cleveland Clinic had a test out that it was in fact effective. And also they said that if you've had COVID, you have the antibodies in your body from having COVID, which are more effective than the vaccine. And so it's amazing how these things, and also remember when he went to the church, St. James in Washington, when they tried to burn it down, and he walked across with with the staff, and for days and days, the news were screaming that he's a tin pot dictator, and only a dictator would do this, and they cleared free-loving people and peaceful protesters that were burning down the church, but we won't mention that. And yesterday, the report came out that they had begun to clear the area to put up barriers before President Trump decided to go over to the church. And so all of that stuff, days and days and weeks of this lies that they're telling you. Let me tell you what I've learned in my life. Listen, write this down somewhere. Whenever someone tells me something about someone, my first words are this: I don't believe it. Because 99.9% of the time and 99.9% of the facts aren't facts. It's hearsay, it's lies, it's prejudiced by poisoned eyes and poisoned hearts. And we are living in the most crazy times when things that are being exposed over and over again. And I honestly believe that because of this tremendous wall of lies that was thrown continuously on the American people and other things that took place, that this country is in a situation today where we have leadership that shouldn't be there because they weren't there legitimately. And that's for another show. We have got a tremendous program today, as I said, about Israel, and I am just so excited to share this with you today. Remember, every day at this time we are on the air. dailyfaith.tv. That's the main. If you can always get us on dailyfaith.tv. You can find us on other networks. That's great. But dailyfaith.tv is our base, our home base for this program. And every day is informative, is anointed. We've got some tremendous guests. The last few days, we've just had some tremendous men of God that have been speaking to us. Yesterday, I left the program and I said to Andrew, I said, my Lord, I'm going to watch that program again myself because it's so powerful. And I'm just so thrilled. Things in Moldova are amazing. We are growing every day. We are almost finished Betzer House. Dan Betzer is a pastor friend of mine from Fort Myers, Florida. He has just retired. One of the greatest men of God I've ever met in my life. He was pastor of First Assembly down in Fort Myers. Thousands upon thousands of people attend that church. His church has given more to our ministry in Moldova than any other mission work that their church has ever been involved with. Their ministry has given us just around $1 million to help us in our mission in Moldova over the years we've been preaching in this church. And we wanted to finish the last house on Vatra Village. We have a place called Vatra Village that they'll show you a picture just now as I'm talking about it. It's a village of 6 homes. It's just a few hundred feet away from the largest lake in the country. And in that village, young folk, when they're in the orphanages, they're put on the street at 16, and we go and get them and take them to Vatra Village, put them back in school, share the gospel with them. And sons and daughters Orphans have become sons and daughters, and now they are missionaries. And these young folk are going out into the highways and byways. In Moldova just now, it is still locked down. They've just had another flare-up of COVID, and they've shut the whole place down. And instead of being trafficked by human traffickers that will use them 30 to 50 times a day, each girl is worth about $300,000 a year to a trafficker. And instead of that, they come to our home, and young men, and our homes, we put them back in school, and God is doing ridiculous things. In fact, yesterday I got some photographs that I'll be showing you next week of them rehearsing for their summer camps. And what they do is they go out all through the summertime and they preach the gospel to kids that have never heard. And they do skits, and it's just crazy what they do. I mean, with a set and everything else, they build their own set. It's amazing how God does this. And a few weeks ago, they sent me this video. And this is they made this video. They did the taping, the recording of it. They wrote the text. They did the voice. In fact, one of our house parents is Jazz Gould. It's her voice you're going to be hearing. And in the middle of it, you're going to see a bunch of girls walking up a stairs in Vatra village into their brand new home, into their brand new bedrooms. And every time I see this, my heart fills, because what this represents is them leaving a life where a toothbrush was a luxury, where toothpaste was a dream. And here they are now with their own beds, their own chest of drawers to put their own clothes into. It is amazing. And you may say, well, how on earth do you keep this going? Just by folk like you. And we've been doing this for 33 years now. And it is absolutely ridiculous how God has provided and blessed us. Even through this pandemic, we've kept growing. We are thankful to God. Watch this video made by the kids for me, and you'd enjoy. Watch this.
You start by carving out a space to build safe places for them, to regain trust in themselves and in humanity. You start by giving them a place to belong, to call home. You start by pulling out the roots of fear, of abandonment and rejection. You start by letting them know how much they matter and how loved they are. You start by showing them what love is. You start by teaching them to release the burden. It is not theirs to carry. You start by teaching them to forgive the broken people who have wronged them and to forgive themselves. You start to give them the tools to better themselves and to change their future. You start by educating and empowering them. You start by speaking truth into their potential. You start by putting candles on their birthday cakes. This is the place where the Orphans Hand starts. On the other side of fear, abuse, poverty, and human trafficking stands Vatra village. Countless lives, one mission: to lift up the fallen.
Because of Vatra village, I am safe.
I have food.
I have a bed.
School to go.
A family.
But most importantly, Vatra village gave us God.
This is the miracle of Vatra village. A miracle that wouldn't have been possible without your kind giving. Your care and love opened doors of hope and allowed us to rescue the perishing. You've helped the Orphans' Hands build these amazing homes, so please, continue to stand with us in prayer, faith, and action as we keep a light on for those that have lived in darkness for too long. You can change their life for $1 a day. Thank you for caring.
You can change a life for $1 a day. If I were to stand with you at the back door of a trafficker's car, and any one of those girls was about to get into that car and be taken away into hell, beaten and raped until they submit, then be used 30 to 50 times a day, drugged to keep them placid and quiet, and then drugged to keep them alive. If I were to stand there at the back of that car and I were to say to you, we can save this girl for $1 a day, there isn't one of you that wouldn't say, Philip, please, I'll be a part of it. Well, that's exactly what I'm asking you to do today. You can give $1 a day. It won't change your world financially. It will spiritually, because God will bless you, multiply it back to you, press down, shaking together, and running over. But $1 a day won't change your life. But I promise you this, every face you've just watched in that video, their lives have been changed by someone like you partnering with the Orphans Hands to give $1 a day. And we have an address on the screen right now. It's really simple. Just the Orphans Hands, P.O. Box 25, Clinton, Tennessee 37716. P.O. Box 25, Clinton, Tennessee 37716. You can do something today that can change your life for eternity. Maybe you're in a situation, maybe your family is needing a miracle today, and you're saying, God, how can I get my unsaved loved one saved, or my prodigal son home? Why don't you cast your bread upon the water, seed, give something to show that you're still in this thing, believing God for an answer. And when you do, I believe that God will hear and see your gifts and will respond into your faith. You can contact us by calling 833-DAILY-FAITH, 833-DAILY-FAITH. Just go to your keypad and type out Daily Faith after you've put in 833, and it'll ring and someone will pick up the phone and talk to you. Or you can go to our website, dailyfaith.tv, and be a part of something magnificent in the name of Jesus. If you give, and when you give that $1 a day or any gift you'd like to help us, we're trying to finish Betzer House right now. We've got a whole container that we need to send. In fact, one goes out this coming Monday, and then we need to immediately start working again on a furniture container to furnish Betzer House so we can take in more kids. And so if you'd like to give a one-time gift, that would be really helpful at this particular time. I got news. This is the kind of stuff I get all the time. I got news the other day that one of our vans, we've got a Volkswagen van, a passenger van that we use to deliver stuff as well as transport kids from Vatra Village. And it has done 600,000 kilometers and is giving up the ghost as we speak. And that van is the lifeline to feed starving widows that can't get out of their house because of COVID. There's no way to get to a grocery store because there's no grocery store in the village. And if we don't bring stuff, and we're in a real panic at the moment because that is a life and death need. And we found a Ford Ranger pickup truck, a 2016 Ford Ranger truck that is 15,000 euros, which is about $20,000. And we are believing God for that. Maybe you'd like to help us do that. And I mean this sincerely. It would be like you giving food to someone that was starving to death. And maybe you're a church watching, maybe you're a businessman or woman, and you can say, I can help towards that truck. Please get in contact with me today. I really need to hear from you. Those that give any amount, or if you'd like to help us by giving $1 a day, I want to send you this book, How I Adopted My Son Andrew. It is the most ridiculous story of God's opening doors and making ways where there was no way, that allowed us to go into Romania and leave in 3 weeks, start to finish, with a wee baby from an orphanage that was starving to death. That's him right there when I first met him, standing in a crib. All of that paint on that crib is lead paint. I took a piece off and had it tested. And all the kids teethed chewing lead paint. And but the miracle that God gave us about a bummer lamb. If you wonder what a bummer lamb is, watch this very short video and you'll understand. I'll be back in a moment. A lamb that has been rejected by its mother is called a bummer lamb. Once its mother abandons her lamb, it is forever. The lamb will die broken unless a shepherd rescues it. He takes the lamb into his home, feeds, cares, and redeems the broken animal. When returned to the flock, that bummer lamb never forgets the one who redeemed it. Standing abandoned in a Romanian orphanage, my wife Chrissy and I found a bummer lamb. His name was Andre. This book is the story of how a family made room for a little forsaken bummer lamb. It is the story of us all. We stand redeemed by the care of the Good Shepherd. And that is the truth. Thank God for the Good Shepherd. And that picture of him being dedicated in Evangela Temple in Montgomery, Alabama, by the pastor who was there, a great friend of mine, Phil Hasty. And my dad stayed over, didn't go back to Scotland. I went over for a week and ended up being there for the month to get Andrew out. And he said, I'm not leaving till I see my new grandson. What a day that was. And you can help us. Again, one more time, the address is P.O. Box 25, Clinton, Tennessee, 37716, or 833 Daily Faith, or you can go to our website, dailyfaith.tv, and make a miracle happen. Because when you make a miracle happen in someone's life, God makes a miracle happen in yours. I am thrilled and honored to have my friend with me for many years. This has been a great friendship of my life and a great man of God. And a few weeks ago we were talking and he began to share some things that he had uncovered and realized. And as he spoke to me, I said, my Lord, we've got to get Mark back on Daily Faith to share this information with you, because I just want you to know that I stand 100% behind Israel. Do you hear me? I love Israel. And there is nothing you can say, nothing you can do, no matter how much opinion and all the stuff that's going on, the garbage against this nation. Nothing will sway us in our ministry and me in my personal life, that God's hand is on this nation. Mark Ivey is a great man of God. Mark, I am so glad you are with me today, and I am excited to have you on Daily Faith. How are you doing, my brother?
Hey, we're great, Philip. It's really an honor to be with you. And I know we're going to talk about Israel, but as you were speaking about the need of the van, I just felt wanted. I thought for a moment, and let's get this taken care of today. We will match any gift up to $10,000.
Oh, my
if people
goodness.
will give today, we'll match any gift up to $10,000. Let's get this van purchased today so we can get this done, because it's a significant need. Most people don't understand the need of travel in foreign countries. It's so easy to travel here in the U.S.
Yes.
And most people don't understand the need, but how difficult it also is to get vehicles. And then even sometimes the roads aren't even drivable sometimes.
What's happened is we've been driving this Volkswagen van, and it's done 600,000 kilometers. When they took a picture of the odometer, I almost fainted. And that's
like 360,000 miles in U.S. miles.
On Moldovan roads, it's like 10 million miles. It's horrendous. And they found in Moldova a four-wheel drive, diesel-engined Ford Ranger truck, a pickup truck, which will allow them to carry way more stuff. It still has front and rear seating, so it'll carry the same amount of our kids, but it'll haul more food and supplies to people in need. And it's 15,000 euros, which is just at the $20,000 mark. And that is just such an amazing gift. I cannot tell you how much that means to us, Mark, because it's been nagging inside me. I spoke to Nadia yesterday and I said, Nadia, I'm believing God for this truck. We've got to have this truck. And she says, Dad, we need it so badly. So you do not know how much this means. So for those that are watching, if you would like to give right now, if you give $1, it's worth $2. If you give $1,000, it's like giving $2,000. Because Mark I'm stunned by your gift. Christ Alive Church in Newton, North Carolina will match everything up to $10,000. And I am so deeply thankful for that, Mark. That was not planned, believe me. That's a gift from heaven. I am excited.
Getting back of the Lord to do it. So let's make it happen. Let's get this thing done today.
We could have the truck running, feeding people by Monday, if God can help us today, and folk will respond to his prompting. So wherever you are in the world, come on, Scots friends of mine, my Welsh friends, all of my friends that watch this, you can give on your charge card. If you go to dailyfaith.tv, there's a giving page there, so you can give internationally. And we have a $20,000 need that has just been cut in half. If you will match this $10,000 challenge that Mark has just this second given, it means that we can have this new truck in Moldova this next week, and that would just be insanity. Talk about giving the devil a black eye. Dear Lord Jesus, that is amazing. Thank you so much. Now to try and get my brain back inside my head, we talked the other day, and you spoke about Israel, and I said, whoa. You cannot just talk about this to me. You got to share this with our Daily Faith audience. Tell us why Israel still matters to the folk that are watching today.
Well, sometimes when we speak about what's going on around the world, people look at this as a political issue. And this is a reason why some churches, Christian organizations, even pastors are reluctant to bring it up. But this is not a political issue. This is a biblical issue.
Absolutely.
It is something that goes all the way back to the book of Genesis, chapter 3:15, and the prophetic word that God himself said, you're going to bruise his heel, the seed, you're going to bruise his heel, but he's going to chop off your head.
Yes.
And ever since that time, there has been this struggle, not between governments, but literally between God and Satan himself, and between the people of God and the people of Satan. Wow. And as you look through the history of the Jewish people, and most of us know this has been a challenging history from the time of Abraham to the time that we are living in right now. As a matter of fact, if you go back and look at history, since it was built by King David, and he really took control of the city of Jerusalem. Jerusalem has been attacked 52 times, besieged 23 times, ransacked 39 times, destroyed twice, rebuilt 3 times, and captured and recaptured 44 different times. And 3,000 years later, Jerusalem still remains the capital of the state of Israel. And even though there are individuals that don't want to acknowledge that, it is God that acknowledges it. And the fact is, it all began in Jerusalem, and one day it's all going to end in Jerusalem. So this isn't something that we can ignore and just kind of say it's a political issue that we don't need to take care of. This is something we need to help people understand, that God's hand is on this nation. And when you bless Israel, you place your hand in the hand of the Lord for blessing from God himself.
Now listen, Mark, I want to put up a graphic. I saw this years ago, and it blew my mind. People wonder about Israel and, the importance of this, how big is Israel? Why is there such consternation over this place? And I saw this graphic, and I'm going to have them put it up right now, just to give you an idea of Israel in its size relative to the state of Florida. So the green is Florida, and the blue is the state of Israel. So all of these wars and all of the sieges and ransackings and nations spinning and turning and turmoil, put that back up again, Philip, is over a piece of geography that stretches from as far as from Fort Myers up to Daytona Beach, thereabouts. It goes across the middle of Florida. That is the size of Israel. So when you hear people screaming and shouting about how Israel's got our land, Israel, the percentage of land that Israel has in the Middle East is a grain of sand compared to what the Arab states around it has. But the difference is, in the middle of their land is a place called Israel. And when Moshe Dayan led the Israeli forces into Jerusalem and reunited and rejoined Jerusalem together, and Israel had control over Jerusalem, I said as a boy, it will never change again. That is how it's going to be from now on. And once again, President Trump moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, recognizing that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel from now forward.
Well, let's take a look at this for a minute, because there's a slide that I sent the other day. And if they can pull that up, it's a map of the Middle East.
Yes.
And it shows the original land grant that God, there it is, that God gave to Israel. Now look at this.
Wow.
Now just
Oh, my
compare that
goodness.
with what the slide was in Florida, right?
Yes.
This was the original land grant that God gave to Abraham. It
my
goes
goodness.
way up north of Syria, way over into the eastern part of Iraq, way
Yes.
down into Saudi Arabia, over
That's
into
amazing.
Egypt.
Yeah.
That was the original land that God gave to Israel. And let's make it clear here whose land it really is, okay? Because Israel is often referred to as occupying Palestinian territory, right? Okay, so let's get the facts on this, because where did the name Palestine or Palestinians actually come from? Most people don't know this. It was the Roman Emperor Hadrian. Okay, so we're going way back into the Roman times. It was the Roman Emperor Hadrian who scattered many of the Jews throughout the Roman Empire. And in the first, now this is one of many falsifications, because you understand that we have a narrative, many narratives that are going through the world today, many things, not just with Israel, but there's a narrative to get us to believe certain things that are not true. And one of them has to do with the nation of Israel. In one of many of the falsifications of history, he changed the area's name to Syria Palestina. Okay, he changed it. That was what the Roman emperor did. That was his call, Hadrian. And he changed the name to Syria Palestina after the Greek Philistines, who had become extinct 800 years earlier. Now, we're not talking that they were descendants. Palestinians are not descendants of the Philistines.
No. He
named that area after the Philistines, called it Syria Palestina, who had already been extinct for 800 years. So understand this, all right? So those of you that are listening, Palestine was not a people. It is a made-up name that the Roman emperor maliciously attaches to Judea, Israel, and the land of the Jews. And here's a statement here. The Jews cannot occupy a land that already belongs to them.
Absolutely.
It belonged to them from the start. So if somebody ever says to you, okay, so there's an independent Palestinian state or kingdom or whatever, politely ask them, okay, what borders did it have?
Yeah.
Who ruled it? From when and where did it exist? Okay, there is a narrative, another narrative out there that says that Jerusalem is just as sacred to the Muslims as it is to the Jews. Is that true or false? Well, here's a fact. Jerusalem is mentioned over 800 times in the Bible. It is not mentioned once in the Quran.
I didn't know that.
So we've got another narrative that is going on here.
Wow.
And what's interesting about this is that Israel and the Jews are the only nation on earth that inhabits the same land, bears the same name, speaks the same language, worships the same God as it did 3,000 years ago. And a lot of this information you can find from the real history of Israel, and I would point people there. You can argue with a taxi driver in Tel Aviv about which route to take using the same language that Moses used to lead the Israelites out of Egypt.
Oh my gracious.
So,
oh my goodness.
Of all the new borders in any war that happens, of all the new borders that are created since World War I, the only area that is referred to as occupied is the area that the Jewish people have. So by the time you get through World War I, by this time, the name that Hadrian had placed on the Jewish land as Palestina, by the time we end World War I, everyone living there, Jews, Arabs, Muslims, Druids, Christians, whoever they might be, they're now all called Palestinians. Okay? And this
so the name
is again,
drifted. The name has drifted across everybody at this point. Interesting fact, you may not know this, but that guy Hadrian was a troublemaker. Hadrian built a wall across Scotland. Same guy. And you can go today to the south of Scotland, and there is a wall that delineates the end of the Roman Empire. One side is Scotland, which was never part of Rome, which is a biblical point that I make often, that we were never part of the great Roman Empire. They built a wall. This guy called Hadrian was there. He was causing trouble everywhere, Mark.
Yes, he was. Yeah. So think about this for a minute. If you go back to the book of Isaiah, chapter 66, okay, listen to what Isaiah says. He says, who has ever seen anything as strange, shocking, amazing as this?
Wow.
Has a nation ever been born in a single day? Has a country ever come forth in a mere moment? But by the time Jerusalem's birth pangs begin, her children will be born. And so what happens in 1948? Literally, in a day.
In a day.
A nation is actually not born, it is reborn.
Yeah.
Because after the fall of Jerusalem and the Babylonians invaded, the final invasion of Israel in 586 BC, Israel, as far as the governments of the world are concerned, ceases to exist. There is a Jewish people.
Yeah.
But there is no longer in the minds of the governments of the world since 586 BC to 1948, there is no Jewish nation. There are some Jewish people. And so when the Balfour Declaration that comes forth and says, well, we're going to give the Jewish people their own land, that's almost laughable. Yeah. Because they weren't giving them land that somehow belonged to somebody else. They were giving them the land that already belonged to them. And somehow, we have believed another narrative.
Yes.
In the history of the nation of Israel. We're believing it in America right now, too, as a matter of fact, about this country.
The Balfour Treaty, one thing is I love history, and I've got this audiobooks of Winston Churchill, and he was with Balfour when they carved up the kingdoms that we now recognize as Iraq and Iran and all these. They chose the families that were Bedouin tribes, and they said, this guy looks more honest than this guy, will make him a king. I mean, all of that was done by Balfour, and Churchill was involved in it as well. So everything that you're seeing that is in the Middle East is not a grand historical for centuries. These tribes of Bedouins were literally, there was no borders, there was no identifiable countries. The only country that was standing there at that particular time was Israel. And the people had been spread across the world. They had suffered this abuse and the Holocaust under Adolf Hitler. And that, because of, I personally think, the embarrassment of the world, they said, let's give these people back their own land. And they didn't give them back all the land. And as soon as that happened, the Egyptians and everyone else started attacking the state of Israel, the new state of Israel.
Well, think of this for a minute. Despite total, you have total Arab control of the West Bank and Gaza from 1948 to 1967, the Arab world, they don't establish a Palestinian state there. Think about this. They have total control of the occupied territories, but they don't create a Palestinian homeland. So then you get to 1964, the Arab League creates the Palestinian Liberation Organization, right, the PLO. And they mobilize local Arabs, indoctrinate them with hatred toward the Jews, and unite them for the first time, only for the first time in history, as the, quote, Palestinian people. Now, let me just say here.
When was this?
That would have been in 1964. And we're not.
Oops, we've lost Mark. We're going to try and get him back. Isn't this amazing? Isn't this amazing? I've studied the Mideast and looked at how all of the countries were developed and created. And it was, okay, go ahead, we'll go, Mark, go ahead. Go ahead. We lost you for a second, Mark. Keep going.
Okay. So they mobilize all the local Arabs, indoctrinate them with hatred toward the Jews. And the Palestinian Article 24, now this is interesting, states that the Palestinians had no claim to the West Bank or Gaza. So, and the charter also calls for the entire annihilation of the state of Israel. So 3 years later, watch this, 3 years later, Israel liberates Gaza and the West Bank, and the Palestinians immediately amend Article 24, okay? So the question is this, is Israel rich and the Palestinians poor? True or false? Okay, well, in many cases that's true, but why? Where does all the money go that's been given to the Palestinians? It doesn't go to the Palestinian people.
No, it doesn't.
Okay, it went initially to Yasser Arafat. Okay, and they've been paid over $345 million a year to give this money to convicted terrorists. Okay, now watch this, and this is interesting in the history of Israel, and I didn't know this. In 2005, Israel commits this, quote, ethnic cleansing. What do? They take all of the Jewish population of Gaza, okay, it's about 8,000 people, and they create something that no other civilized country would dare to do. They hand over the entire area to the Palestinians and said, okay, we won't have any Jews here. And the gratitude is instantaneous, right? Rockets start flying into Israel. Israel is the one that's doing the, quote, right thing, even though the property belongs to them.
Sure.
They're trying to create this sense of peace, right? And rockets start flying. Yeah, rockets start flying into Israel. Now watch this. Instead of building Gaza into a thriving economic base to where the Palestinian people can grow and become prosperous, etc., this is what they do. There's such a hatred from the Palestinian people, the Arabs, toward the Jews, that they demolish an extensive, and this was extensive, they demolished an extensive infrastructure of greenhouses that was purchased by American donors that would have provided thousands of jobs, okay? They destroy them all, okay? And now everything that goes on in that region of the world is a base camp for Palestinians. It's not a concentration camp. People say, well, you know, the nation of Israel is oppressing the Palestinians in Gaza. It's a concentration camp. Here's another fact. If it was a concentration camp, then the most common medical condition among Gaza's women is obesity. Really? Obesity is not a problem in a concentration. Okay, and then when you bring Israel into the United Nations, all right, we would think that the United Nations would be a fair, organization to the nations of the world. Over 70% of the declarations that are made in the United Nations, 70% of them are the nation of Israel.
Listen, okay. Say that again. I want you to listen to this. If you think this is a fair world and an equitable world, say that again, Pastor Marcus. This is really important that you hear what he's going to say.
Yeah, so over 70% of the resolutions that are given about Israel are anti-Israel in the United Nations. Over 70% of the resolutions. And think about this. Wow. Here's this little country, and 70% of the time and the focus of the United Nations is around the nation of Israel. Now the root of this, and we know the root of this, Jesus said this when he's talking to the woman at the well. He said, salvation is of the Jews. This is why this is not a political issue. This is a spiritual issue. You and I are sitting here talking right now as lovers of Jesus. Absolutely. Because of the Jewish people.
Yes.
This all came out of this little land called Israel. We're Christians, and the gospel of Jesus Christ began with Jewish people And this is the Genesis 3:15 prophecy. You're gonna bruise his heel, but he's gonna chop your head off. And the devil has been fighting against the root of Christianity ever since Genesis chapter 3.
And what's amazing
Think
is
about
when Israel became a nation, they immediately setting about to fulfill the prophecy that the desert would blossom as the rose. And so the agricultural, I've been there many times, and the agricultural systems that they have put in place are the best in the world, and they have turned the parts that Israel occupy, or I'm using the word occupy in their terms, the parts of Israel that are controlled by Israelis are the most fertile, beautiful, lush, green, productive things. And there's a fence, and over the fence, the desert is still there. And they literally have fulfilled that scripture that the desert will blossom as a rose.
We were there just before the worldwide COVID pandemic broke out in 2020. And our guide, brilliant guide, she's a Jewish Messianic believer who's been in Israel for many years. We're down getting ready to get on a boat in the Sea of Galilee. The Sea of Galilee was at the highest level it had been in many, many years. This is what she said to us. She said, in order for God to fulfill the prophecies of people coming back to this nation, there has to be enough water for people to drink and to grow the crops. She saw it, she pointed it out to us. The Sea of Galilee was so high, she couldn't believe it. But it was a fulfillment of prophecy, because the people of Israel are now coming back to their nation. Because God is bringing them back to fulfill a final end time word that everything that began in this nation is now also going to end in this nation.
There are direct flights, Mark, from Chisinau, Moldova to Tel Aviv. Early in the morning, if you go to the airport early in the morning, you will see hundreds of Jews that have been lost in Ukraine and Moldova for decades. From the war, I mean, terrible. And you'll see them with huge bundles of all their belongings, getting on a plane, going home. And these people have been isolated for years, and yet the sudden impulse in them. One of the young folk in Vatra village in Moldova, her name is Luda, and we rescued her when she was a little girl, 12 years of age, her mother and father dead. And she learned that there was some Jewish blood in her, and she and her husband George moved to Israel and spent years in Israel, had a baby in Israel. And she called me from Israel one day, and in fact, she called me when she was having the baby in labor, and I spoke for hours and hours on the phone, just encouraging her and stuff. Her husband was working. And when she had the baby, she called me. She says, Dad, we want to go back to Moldova and help the work in Moldova. And George, her husband, is a builder at Brigadoon today, at Vatra village today. So, I mean, God is causing people from all over the world to go back to Israel because there's a divine movement going on right now.
What most people don't realize is that what is happening in the nation of Israel right now is clearly pointing to the return of Jesus.
Absolutely.
And we, we're in our American little bubble here. We think the world revolves around us, right? The world does not revolve around what goes on in America. The world revolves in what's going on and what God is doing in this nation called Israel. And that's why people need to pay attention to this, because it is pointing in what I believe is the soon return of Jesus. And somebody will say, well, we've heard about that, for years. Listen, pay attention to what's going on in this nation, because everything that is happening is pulling us closer to Jesus coming back.
Yes.
And resetting and putting we talk about the nation of Israel and the land. Jesus himself is going to reset the entire world as his land, and Israel is the prototype of what God is going to do around the world when he sets up his kingdom on the world, in this world.
We were 10 minutes left. Now, do you still take tours to Israel? Do you still do that?
Yes, well, absolutely.
Do we have any information that folk can get in contact with you? Because listen, folks, if you're going to go to Israel, go with Mark Ivey. If you're going to go to Israel, go with Mark Ivey. We've got nothing to show the folks apart from your address, ChristAliveChurch.com. Christ Alive Church. If you have ever thought about going to Israel, go with Mark Ivey, because he will take you to all the places, all the important things, but there will be a prophetic twist on everything that you'll see, not just through the lens of history, but you'll see through the lens of prophecy. And that's his address and his information up on the screen, ChristAliveChurch.com. And just say, give me information about going to Israel, and I'm sure they'll do that.
Our plan, assuming the nation opens up again for tours, is to be there in the fall of 2022 during one of the major feasts.
I might come with you.
Come on.
I might just tag along. Tell me, what do you see and what does the scripture say about the future of Israel? Where are we going from the point that we're at, Mark?
Right. Let me take 30 seconds on each of these. First of all, there are people that believe in Reformation theology in the sense that, or restoration theology, that the church is the new Israel. That's not true. The church is not the new Israel. This is not a figurative sense. God is going to fulfill everything he's ever done for Israel. That's all through the New Testament, and Paul's words throughout the book of Romans is that God is going to reestablish everything that he ever said he was going to do for Israel.
Yes.
That is the future. We know that there is the war of Ezekiel 38 and 39. And the Bible clearly identifies the nations of the world that are going to come against Israel. And so you have these nations of, it talks about Gog. That's primarily identified as a leader or a position. And Magog, as the Bible refers to it, Magog was the son of Japheth, who was the son of Noah. And they migrated up to that northern part of Russia. Rosh now is identified as a geological place. Okay, so we're talking here about probably Russia in joining with other nations. You have Meshech and Tubal, which is Moscow or the modern day city of Tobolsk. Okay, this is right in Ezekiel 38 and 39.
Amazing.
You have Persia. That's easy to find out who that is, because they're Iran. Persia was the old Iran. You have Cush, which is Ethiopia and Sudan. You have Put, which is Libya, Gomer, Turkey or Germany, and Sheba and Dedan are Saudi Arabia or the Gulf states. And then you have the mountainous borders with Israel, which are Syria and Lebanon. And so you're going to have this joining of nations that are going to gather against Israel. And what's interesting about this is that it appears that the United States is either not in a position militarily or economically to do anything about it, or that they no longer exist as a nation. And we say, well, that could never happen. Listen, there's no indication here that America gets on the side of Israel. We're sort of on the side of Israel right now, less than we were a year ago.
Boy, that's the truth.
And it seems to indicate that America has, for some reason, has pulled. Some people even say that the rapture of the church has happened, and many people who are in America are gone. Yeah. Regardless of whatever reason it is, it appears that now Israel is standing all by itself, and even America is not with Israel anymore.
For folk to understand, during the last World War, when Germany invaded Poland and the Second World War began, America had no interest. They stood in the sidelines, and Winston Churchill would beg Roosevelt for Lend-Lease material, and literally, when the Germans invaded France, and France was 23 miles, Germany was 23 miles across the English Channel away from Great Britain, and they talked about taking the Royal Navy to Nova Scotia. And Roosevelt said to Churchill, you should go to Nova Scotia and fight the Germans from there. And Churchill says, I'm staying here. And if Hitler wins... So America has stood on the side. Now, when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, they came in, thank God, or the war would have been a disaster. But it has been in the past that America has said, this is not our battle. And if you have someone in power like you have right now, that is not pro-Israel in any shape or form, that is the very opposite. When you're having people in the Democratic Party talk about being pro-Palestinian, that is conceivable that this could happen, and they could say that ain't our fight, and then you're in trouble.
Well, remember, even during the Holocaust, America could have been involved and did not. And here's the real issue, okay? So if you go back to the book of Joel, and I don't know how much time we got here, Philip.
5 minutes.
Just one scripture.
We got 5 minutes.
Okay. So it's Joel chapter 3, verse number 1. Okay, here's what it says. In those days and at that time, when I restore the fortunes of Judah and Jerusalem, watch this, I will gather all nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. So God is saying, I'm going to bring all of these nations together, and there I will put them on trial for what they did to my inheritance, my people Israel. Wow. Here it is, because they scattered my people among the nations and divided up my land.
My goodness. Oh my goodness.
The land belongs ultimately to the Lord. He gave it to the nation of Israel. And God says, I'm going to judge every nation that divided up my land. That's significant. Because we don't think God's paying attention here. It's just a political thing, right? A few months ago, we put three brand new tall flags up on our property. We put the American flag because we're living in America. We put the Appeal to Heaven flag, and that's another story, that George Washington used that flag because he put it on his boats because he knew he couldn't defeat Great Britain, and they appealed to heaven. It's an Appeal to Heaven flag. There's a great history with that. It's another story.
That's interesting.
Then it's an amazing story. It's why we actually won the Revolutionary War, because George Washington appealed to heaven and didn't appeal to his army. Then we put up a third flag. We put up the flag of the nation of Israel.
Fabulous.
Because we weren't making a political statement. We were making a biblical statement. And because we also understand, he that blesses you will be blessed.
Yes,
and he that curses you will be cursed.
That is the truth.
And we want to be on the side of God. I want to be on the side of God. I don't want to be on the side of the world. I want to be on the side of God. Not a political issue, an entirely spiritual issue, because God is moving in the nation of Israel, and he will move in the lives of those individuals that are on his side.
We have 2 minutes left. Do you have all of this in a means by which folk can get in contact with you and you can download this or whatever?
Yes, there's a link that I sent yesterday to Andrew. And it's actually a PowerPoint presentation. Okay. It's all in the link, and all of that information is available. There's the link right there.
There you go. Okay. And my team is if you'd like to get a copy of this sermon and all the notes that you've just heard, and I have a feeling we've just scratched the surface, Pastor Mark. If you would like to go to www.tynurl.com, why Israel still matters. We'll put that up there for a while, and you can get that right now. And it's tiny URL, my son is telling me. Okay, www.tinyurl.com, why Israel still matters. And all of this stuff and much more information, because we have only, in fact, Mark, could you come back and keep this teaching going a little while? Because I think this is...
Hamas. Well, let's talk about Hamas next time, because Hamas is actually referred to in the Bible.
Well, we are going to get Pastor Mark back on, so be watching for the next program with him. We have less than a minute. Thank you so much for being here. You have no idea how much you've answered our mission issue with that truck. That is just a blessing beyond belief, and I'm believing God that folk are watching and saying, we want to make this possible. Let the Lord speak to your heart today. Pastor, thank you so much for being part of our lives. You have been such a blessing to us over the years. And I look forward to many more years until Jesus comes back, killing the devil and kicking him silly. And let me know when you're going to Israel, because if I can get some time off, I'm going to be listening to what you're saying in God's country. We love you, Mark. Thank you for being with us, my friend.
Thank you, Philip. We love you and honor you and believe in you. And I'm grateful just to know you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you for watching Daily Faith. Watch us again this next week. Bye-bye. God bless.
For over 25 years, the Cameron family has been changing the lives of orphans in Romania and Moldova. From providing running water, flushing toilets, and clean wells, to coal for heat, new windows, as well as food and clothing. They champion the physical needs of the orphans in these broken and desolate countries. Many of Moldova's orphans are saved from the horrors of trafficking through homes founded by the Camerons, and in the process, orphans become daughters and sons. They come to know their Heavenly Father and are forever changed by the love of Jesus. God help the Camerons lift these amazing young men and women out of darkness. Now, no longer orphans, they want to return and invade that very same darkness with the light of Jesus Christ. The Orphans Hand equips these daughters and sons to become missionaries. Your monthly gift of $31 will allow us to rescue and take in more girls and boys, saving them from the hell of human trafficking. Your monthly partnership will allow us to care for those in the Orphans Hand homes in Moldova and the Ukraine. If you want to join Philip and Chrissy in taking care of these precious young people, please contact us today by calling 833-DAILY-FAITH. You can also give by going online to www.dailyfaith.tv or by writing to Post Office Box 25, Clinton, Tennessee 37716. So many lives depend on what we do. Thank you for loving the lost. If you are a pastor, church leader, or business owner and would like to have Philip Cameron come and speak to your church, conference, or event, please call 1-833-DAILY-FAITH or go to pastors.philipdcameron.com or request by mail at attention Andrew Cameron, Post Office Box 25, Clinton, Tennessee 37716.